Hi class. So today I want to go over your PowerPoint slides for poetry. So we're going to get started right now. And I have a link to this for you. And you can print out these slides anytime you would like. So poetry highly depends on making inferences. What makes poetry rich and interesting is that poetry makes use of the five senses: to hear, to see, to touch, to smell, and to taste. So the language in poetry is very rich with the five senses. All of these senses will be highlighted in poetry. I don't know why I want to say sentences, but it's senses. A good poem makes a statement about the human condition. This painting I have here represents how poetry is meant to be read. So it's to create feeling and bring out emotions using the five senses. So if you see here, there's the sense of touch, obviously to see. You can also imagine what the smell is like with the silk clothing, and the feeling is very soft, and it creates a lot of emotion. So that's what poetry is supposed to do, is to bring out a great deal of emotion within you. And that's why, and the emotion is supposed to talk something about the human condition, whatever the context of the human condition is. Poetry relies on imagery, so the words that are created in poetry highly depends on imagery. So one of the pleasures of reading and listening to poetry is the powerful images that poetry presents. The images evoke emotions that words can't do by themselves. Images also have a lasting thought about the topic. So it's a really good idea to read a poem and try to imagine what's going on, what kind of imagery is given by the poet. Poetry, figurative language versus literal language. So poetry language is very figurative. Poems use figurative language with simile, metaphor, personification to compare two unlike things. We're going to look at that in a few minutes in the slides. Literal language, on the other hand, doesn't use simile, metaphor, and personification to compare two unlike things. So here's some examples. In literal language, you would say, "It was raining very hard today." Totally literal, we know what you mean. Figurative language says, "It was raining cats and dogs." So that expression, cats and dogs, implies that it was really raining really, really hard, and it was really fierce and really, really powerful. And so figurative language gives an image of that kind of feeling that would evoke. So cats and dogs don't get along. And if you've got a whole bunch of cats and dogs, you've got a lot of commotion. So it was raining like there was a lot of commotion going on. So that was really raining hard that day, if you say it was raining cats and dogs. So literally, cats and dogs weren't falling from the sky. So figurative language, it's not literal at all. It's just to evoke imagery and feelings. So the first type of figurative language we call simile. A simile uses like or as if to compare two unlike things. Her cheeks were as red as roses. So here's a picture to show you how red her cheeks were. They were as red as roses. That's a comparison. And it's just to show how how red her cheeks were. And there's a picture here that goes along with it for you. A metaphor compares two unlike things without using like, as, or as if. So her cheeks were red roses. Just come out and say it. They were red roses. They weren't using like, as, or as if. Her cheeks were red roses. That's a metaphor. Personification gives human attributes to objects. Roses danced in her mind. So this was the closest picture I found to that, by the way. But roses don't literally dance because only humans can dance. So personification uses that type of imagery to show you what was going on inside someone's mind here in this example. So here's some other poetic devices, and I have a couple of lists here to go over with you that you would use when you're analyzing a poem. So personification, which endows animals, ideas, or inanimate objects with human traits or abilities. Repetition, the repeating of words, phrases, lines, or stanzas. So you might see a word repeated constantly, like rose, rose, rose. So there's a reason why a poet would do that. Rhyme, the similarity of ending sounds existing between two words, rhyming. A simile, a comparison between two objects using a specific word or comparison, such as like, as, or than. A stanza is a group or more lines of a poem in terms of length, metrical form, or rhyme scheme. So when you're referring to that group in a poem, you would call it a stanza, which is like it looks like a little paragraph, but it's a stanza. So when you're referring to that whole group of words, you would say stanza. Synthesia is an attempt to fuse different senses by describing one kind of sense impression in words normally described to use another. That's when you're kind of synthesizing all of your senses with words, and it creates a feeling or an idea. Onomatopoeia, the use of words with intimate sound. Personification, a figure of speech. Repetition, rhyme, simile, stanza. So these are all the poetic devices that you would talk about when you are writing about a poem. You would refer to these particular entities. And your book talks a lot about this in the chapter too. So as you're reading the chapter on poetry, take a look at that. Try reading poetry out loud and savoring the words on the page. Think about the images that poetry evokes. What feelings are you experiencing while you're reading the poems? What images resonate with your experiences and ideas? What lasting thoughts come to you when you read the poem? These questions can help you analyze poems as you read. And really, poetry does not have a right or wrong answer. So I don't want you to worry that you're going to mess it up by reading a poem. Your interpretation of the poem is the most important thing, and how you feel is really important, because the whole idea of a poem is to ignite feelings for you. And this is also my works cited page for all the pictures that I used in my PowerPoint slides. So read this chapter with great care and really enjoy it. And I'm hoping you're going to really enjoy writing your paper on this chapter too, on this module of poetry. Anyways, that's my PowerPoint slides, and I hope you guys have a great time with this.